note that you all are on mute, and to take yourself off of mute, just go to the bottom left of your screen. I'm going to start with the roll call and roll call of our voting members. The City of Tucson.
Here.
City of South Tucson. Tohono O'odham Nation. Pasquiyaki Tribe.
Here.
Pima County.
Here.
Town of Marana.
Here.
Town of Sahuarita. Town of Oro Valley.
Here.
Well, first off, I would like to introduce our new staff member at the RTA. I'd like to introduce, he's our senior transportation planner. His name is Preston McLaughlin, and he comes to PEG from the North Central Texas Council of Governments, where he was an active transportation planner. It's in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And prior to being at NCT COG, he worked at the Texas DOT. So please welcome Preston. He has been here for a little less than a month, and he just has recently relocated into Tucson.
Hello, everybody. It's nice to be here.
Thank you, Preston. And we're looking forward to have Preston on board to working with us on the transit services, as well as the planning initiatives within RTA for transit. Let's go to item number 2, which is the in-kind form. Regional planning efforts are enhanced by recording time donated by attendees, volunteers, and participants. PEG collects data on the time dedicated to meetings and activities to apply for use as matching funds for grants and federal dollars. If you are paid with federal dollars, please let us know now.
Hey, Amber, James and Rhett are both paid with federal dollars.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? The time spent in preparation for this meeting will be estimated by PEG staff, who are knowledgeable of the agenda and meeting materials. At the conclusion of this meeting, the session report will automatically calculate your time spent in this meeting. Time spent working on PEG, RTA initiatives, programs, and special projects may also be eligible for consideration for matching funds. So moving on to item number 3 is our Sun Express service discussion. This we just would like to revisit based off of the 2016 performance measures that the the Transit Working Group adopted and reanalyzed in 2019. The group reviewed updated Sun Express performance reviews, and there were 5 low performing routes that were discussed with further analysis needed. I think, Zonia, we have a slide that just shows a summary of the service standards that if folks have questions about. But I have Davida with Suntran will present an update on the Sun Express service, how service was impacted during COVID, and how service will be reintroduced post-pandemic. So Davida, are you ready?
I'm not sure about the ready part, but I am here.
Well, thank you.
So I guess good morning, everyone. It's been a crazy day already. Could you add up the Excel document about the express passenger load, please? Thank you. So what we did this last couple of months is we looked at where passenger loads were, because that's one of the items was, passengers per trip is an operating standard. We'd like to get to 15 or greater. As you can see, even previously, there were a lot of trips that weren't quite to that 15. We were working on it. And then, of course, we had the health crisis. So one of the things that we had to do because of manpower, because of people not going to the offices frequently, is we reduced every express route down to at least one trip in the morning and one trip in the afternoon. And what you see on the right, the March 15th through May 15th is where we're at right now. I will tell you, as of May 15th, we continue to have those numbers go up slightly, a little bit at a time. And we also increasingly are getting requests from not only county employees who've been back in the office more frequently, but as city employees come back into the office. And we expect more requests come August when U of A and TUSD come back to the classroom, though TUSD is starting to advertise that some students will have the opportunity to either be virtual or in person. So there's going to be a mixture there as well. It won't be quite to the level. One of the issues that Suntran has is because of the health crisis, we are also having a workforce issue, and we're not alone in the region with that. So our plan is ever evolving and changing as we have people that can do items, do pieces of work, drive the routes, but also as we have requests. So our plan as of this morning, about 10 minutes ago, is as we have workforce available, as we have more requests and people to that need to get back to the office, is we'll start adding trips, 1 or 2 at a time. If Crystal, if you could also put up the Word document with the recommendations, that would be really helpful. Originally, we were going to bring back in August as many trips as we could, at least 1 per route, with the exception of the 109, 201, and 204. What we're going to do is we're going to prioritize this list of trips, of adding in a trip either in the morning or in the afternoon, as we are able to include, as well as we're able to with drivers. We had a class that started yesterday, however, it was only 2 people. So we're still, losing as we're gaining. So we're trying to fix that. But this list, as I get it in a priority method, we'll be able to send it out to everybody. The other thing that we want to look at is when we were looking at the loads, was we have a couple of trips where we've received feedback that it's not quite at the right time. So we have a trip currently that on Golf Links Express starts at 6:11 in the morning. It has only 4 passengers. And we've had comments that the 7:15 trip might have been better. So we're going to look at maybe not do the 6:11 trip and instead do the 7:15 trip. The 7:15 trip pre-COVID carried 20 people in the morning. So that is one of the trips that met or exceeded the passenger per trip operating standards. And that's where I'm at with expresses today. So if you have any questions, and before I leave it to that, what we want to do is continually look at this over the next 6 months. And in February, come back and talk to the transit working group as a whole about how we want to continue for the last couple of years with RTA in relation to the expresses. Are we doing the right trips? Do we need to change the trips? Do we need to keep the express? Maybe there's a route that just doesn't make sense and we should eliminate it from the list. But all those questions we'll talk about the first of the year. Okay, now I'm open to questions.
Does
Can't
anybody have any questions or additional input in terms of the Sun Express routes?
Hey, Davida, it's Rhett, City
Hey,
Tucson.
Rat.
Do you feel that you can cover these routes from a manpower issue?
The ones that we're currently doing, we can cover from a manpower issue. If we make an adjustment to a route, we'll definitely make sure that we can cover the manpower. If we add in a trip, it's because we've added operators and we can cover it, but we're not going to add as many trips as we originally hoped because of manpower. So we are looking at bringing them back one at a time as we are able to.
And that would begin August 8th.
Yes, if we bring any trips back, it would begin August 8th. But we'll look at it really closely, basically on a day-to-day situation. So we might bring something back if we are able to, and this is completely, if we are able to, if we find that in September we have enough drivers, maybe in September we bring back a couple of trips. If we're able to, in October, maybe bring back a couple more, but we won't bring back any trips if we don't have somebody to operate it, because it would be really bad to put out a new ride guide saying that we're bringing back the trips and then have a number of people call out sick and not have somebody to be able to drive that route.
Thank you.
So Davida, is the current trips that the Sun Express is taking, are those on that Excel spreadsheet on the post-COVID side? So that's currently the level, and then they'll be prioritized based on some of these recommendations. Is that correct?
Correct. And the only thing that we might do with the list that was on the Excel is maybe shift a trip. Like I said, if we find that we have a trip early in the morning that's only carrying one person, if we shift that trip to a later, it doesn't change our manpower, but it might give us a more productive trip and help people get to work. Like I said, the requests we've had is from people that are returning back to the office on a regular basis. So
I think the reason why we wanted to bring this up is that just service, and then you add on the difficulties with labor shortages. I think this hybrid approach is that you've presented is something that we can continue to monitor. And does anyone have any questions?
Davida, we were wondering for the 107, for example, you're shifting the pickup time an hour later. I would expect that you guys had already talked to those riders that were boarding, and probably that's why you made that decision. How did you come up?
So if we were talking about changing a trip or adding a trip obviously is because we've gotten a request. If we are looking at changing a trip, we will definitely be talking to the riders on that vehicle at that time of the day. So, if there's only one or two, it may be the driver talking to them, or my plan was to make a tiny survey that with an email address that they could send us a note saying how they're doing, unless somebody was able. Usually it's just the operator at 550. I don't have a data collector usually able to do those early morning trips.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, John. That's a good question, though. Yeah, we want to make sure that we don't make it worse for somebody who's actually already using it in hopes of getting more riders.
Davida, do you have a specific kind of a threshold number of riders that you're looking at that would trigger or prioritize the reintroduction of a trip? I was looking at some of those numbers and they were pretty low, particularly
are.
compared to previously. But we're kind of in a chicken and egg situation too, where if we're not providing it, they're not going to show, and we've got to make some commitments in order to get people back on, particularly with the upcoming university school year. Because I think that's where a lot of your repeat riders are coming from.
Yes, and at the moment it's not very scientific, because of the only feedback that we're getting for places where we don't already have trips is when somebody takes the time to call in, or someone who's already on the bus. There's a number of us that ride that where somebody's come up, or Luce is in doing outreach meetings where somebody's come up to a Centran employee and said, I was writing the trip. I would really like to do this. Can you look at re-implementing it? And so some of it, the problem is in the case for myself, the person that approached me was a county employee, and her comment was, my coworkers are asking if I've heard anything, if I've seen anything, because they really want to come back to the bus, but it's not the trips that I need are not the trips that are being offered. So that's where we started to look at, for example, the 101. I'm going to play with that one for multiple scenarios. The 7:15 trip, a number of people that are riding the bus right now at 7:41 said, well, we're getting to work a half an hour early because you're not offering the later bus. So we're more interested in the later bus. But there wasn't enough people to split that trip in half. However, over the last few weeks, that trip has continued to grow. And in fact, we're getting to a place where we're at, it's not reflective here, but where we're at a place where we have 17 to 20 people riding that individual trip. So as the trip builds, then we start looking at it. As we get requests, then we look at what we have. If it's not there now, what was it pre-COVID? And then the other is we have these trips that have one person, but a different trip had a lot more people pre-COVID. Those are the ones that'll be easier and at the same more difficult, because we'll be able to talk to the person who's writing the trip, but we are still guessing about whether the other individuals will come back. So I'm sorry, it's not very scientific at the moment. I wish I had a better way of doing it.
Thanks, Davida. I don't know that there is any scientific way to do this. It's so thanks for your comments.
But I will tell you, we'll keep watching this and we'll keep looking at it and trying to come up with the best way. I know I miss being, for me, I will tell you, I was a regular express rider, and the trip that I used is not here. And when I have ridden the other trip, I feel like I'm very late to work because it's an hour and a half later than I usually start. So for me, it's kind of a balance, but I have the flexibility to be able to change my work schedule as I need to. I don't know that most of the people that would normally ride the bus have that same flexibility. So if you don't have any more questions, I'll come back again as Amber needs me to, and then again, definitely at the end of the year.
Well, thank you. We will continue monitoring the service and the routes, and bring back maybe some more analysis as well as a review in February, as you've indicated. And then we can look at, adjustments, shifts, things that need to be addressed. And I think, as you indicated, there is no scientific way to do this. coming out of COVID. So I appreciate your input, and particularly with these routes, and being able to look at the flexibility of them and bring them on in a prioritized manner. So, and thanks for coming today to discuss your approach.
Thanks, Amber.
We appreciate it. So let's move on to item number 4, and it is the Sun Shuttle Dial-A-Ride update. In February of 2021, Total Ride replaced AutoCab with VIA scheduling and dispatching system. They went from their old scheduling system of AutoCab to VIA, which is an automated scheduling and dispatching, at the end of February. I've got Reno and Wade here from Total Ride, and they're going to present a update on the current services that we're seeing with Dial-A-Ride, and an overview of the new scheduling and scheduling software and what it means to our Dial-A-Ride system and service.
Thank you, Amber. Again, my name is Reno Navarrete, Vice President and General Manager for Total Transit Total Ride. With me today is Wade Harding, our Director of Information Technologies. I'll kick us off by really just providing you with some general updates or overviews of FSSDAR. We are starting to see a ridership increase in the past few months. To give you an idea, pre-COVID, we were transporting on average about 550 passengers per weekday. Current weekday trips are about 245. So it looks like about a 50% increase from December and even January. In May, we transported 4,950 passengers in 2021, and May of this year was 4,950. So we're actually starting to see those increases. Same thing with fixed route. We've seen a ridership increase in March to 5,490. That's down from last March number of 7,086. So slight decrease in ridership, but certainly we are starting to see the riders come back. Some of the current system challenges after COVID-19, I think the biggest issue, and we've heard this already, is driver shortages. And it should not come as a surprise to transit professionals on this call that the industry as a whole is suffering from driver shortages across the nation. And not only just the fixed route transit drivers, but paratransit, school bus, even rideshare drivers like Uber and Lyft have left the industry. So as a result of the driver shortages, our passengers are having a hard time scheduling rides. We're having issues with pickup windows, resulting in late rides or canceled service. It's unfortunate, but we do see that occur on occasion. Currently, our company is down about 20 drivers from pre-pandemic levels. Many of the outstanding vacancies are a result of drivers changing careers after COVID-19. Some drivers did retire due to the pandemic if they had the age and the time in with our company. Some guys that weren't planning to leave have left. We certainly have seen more people retire, this past year than normal years. On top of the 20 some drivers who have left the company, we're still dealing with the impact of the pandemic, with remaining staff members unable to work if they've been exposed to the virus or have childcare issues, or maybe they found it easier to work from home. I think it's just kind of been the perfect storm type situation where whatever could go wrong, has gone wrong. So kind of moving forward, and obviously it's important for us to quickly fill the vacancies, especially with more people expected to return to transit this fall. As schools start to reopen and additional workers return to the office, it's imperative that we start hiring immediately, so that the new bus drivers are prepared for the big push, probably around Labor Day or in the fall. I know it sounds crazy, but it does take a while to prepare a driver for service. It could take up to 2 months for a bus operator to be hired, trained, and familiar with their routes or the service area. So since January, we've been pushing really hard and been focused on driver recruitment, training, and retention. We have had several recruiting events, open houses, posting flyers throughout the community. We're looking at creative ways to draw folks, even, everything's on the table, from increased wages to hiring bonuses, incentive retention bonuses, opportunities for advancement, and paid training. So again, as we get through the next couple of weeks and months, it's going to be critical to get the driver numbers back up so that we can provide full service. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. Hearing none, I'll turn it over to Wade.
Alrighty, so as Amber said, we've updated the VIA, and it was quite an enhancement. Obviously we did have challenges. I think the two biggest remaining challenges have been with essentially assigning the drivers to shifts and getting all of the shifts to work. And a lot of that is not just adjusting to a new technology, but also being able to handle, turnover with drivers and not having enough drivers. But that efficiency has gone up. And then the second issue has been with the data. And there's some data fields that have changed, and there's a lot of differences from the AutoCab system because it was more of a demand response as opposed to scheduled and routing. But so far, VIA has provided everything that we said it was going to coming up, and I think we've gotten over the hump with rolling it out. We do have automated routes. We've increased ride pooling, or more riders on a single vehicle, and we're getting better routes. We're able to deal with the amount of time on the vehicle better, and we're also able to send out ETAs via SMS or text or phone call. Riders now need, and this has been a big kind of change in, riders did not schedule always in advance or as far in advance. And so to get the great spots, they should schedule now in advance. And I think we've sent out some communication to help improve that, and it has improved. We've had a few challenges with certain drivers, but we've been able to overcome those. So now we're in our fourth full month of VIA, and we've had some enhancements like scheduling to arrive at their destination at a specific time, and then the enhanced rider profiles that's integrated with the the ADA eligibility file has been a great help to tracking rider special needs and making the transport more convenient. Moving forward over the next 30 to 60 days, we're working with VIA right now and with Amber and the rest of PAG RTA to introduce the VIA passenger mobile app for riders to manage their transport electronically. And this may just start with them being able to see what they've scheduled, cancel their trip or change it, but we will have the ability to let them book trips as we move forward, and we'll have to see how that's adopted and how it goes. So with that, any questions?
So Wade and Reno, thank you so much for giving us the updates. What do you think, how is the rider experience from our end? What we're seeing is that the scheduling software has been implemented. It has created some efficiencies with ride sharing, which is a great way to provide a paratransit service. But in some cases, these folks, it was in COVID. So there were some challenges in terms of of the ride pooling. Am I correct? And folks with the initial, they were upset about being with others.
Yes, and we, we needed to accommodate that, and for the most part, we were able to accommodate that. We, in some cases, they didn't want to wait for another vehicle, so they've scheduled with of Uber or Lyft or something else. But overall, I think we've been able to talk this through with passengers, and we've been able to get to a point where they've adapted to this more ride sharing, and really it wasn't necessarily more during COVID. It's just that since it's optimized, it changed. We used to just say, okay, we're assigning these manually to a route. So we knew that it was mostly recurring trips that were on a route. And, but ride pooling works better with some of the outliers, and it gets some of the people that would have a much longer transport time, and we probably wouldn't be able to make the service level times. It picks those people, it allows those people to be picked up closer to being on time, and many times on time, and it's much more efficient. So I think that overall, we're starting to get really good feedback from the passengers, and a lot of the initial, especially COVID-related complaints have dissipated, and people are adjusting to being a ride pool service like the rest of the services in the county.
Can you explain the text notifications when they get sent out to riders?
So they get a, and we may have taken one out, but I think they get a 30-minute, a 10-minute, and a 5-minute notification. And some of this was getting the one in advance. We were making a lot of changes at first because of riders that didn't want to go or different situations. So we may have reduced down to the 10 or 5-minute to give more accurate ETAs, but it sends out an ETA that your driver's on the way. And that's been a big adjustment. We really didn't have that type of a service at all in the past. But I think overall now riders know when to be ready. And once we have adjusted to some of the drivers were showing up earlier than they did in the past to different passengers. So once we've adjusted to that and the riders have adjusted to it, I think we've had a lot more success with it.
How do you plan to roll out the passenger portal, the passenger app?
Well, that's a good question. We're probably going to have a meeting and talk about how we, but I think the first step would be to do some internal testing and then let you and team go through and test it. And, let's make sure it's easy to use and that it's user friendly, and then compile a communication that we would send out. And that communication would be out to all the recipients saying that you can now use this. And my philosophy is to start simple. Technology can make things really complex, and it can confuse people, and that doesn't that brings complaints. So I think we should start with saying this is going to initially tell you, where's your ride. And you can go in and log in ahead of time and say, oh, here it is. And I can see it on the map. And I think that would be a great improvement. And we may need to assist some passengers to be able to download it from the App Store and get that going. But I think once we get through that, then we can look at some of the more advanced features, like being able to cancel or change a trip or even schedule transport. I don't believe it'll be a good idea to roll that out all at once because it can get complex, and that's where it's at. So I think in the next week here, we're going to be talking to VIA more closely, and we should be testing hopefully by the end of June, if not early July.
Will the app eventually allow users to pay fares whenever those are implemented again?
Yes, we did. With VIA, we did create, because we didn't know when the fares were going to start again. So we did actually create the completely automated faring system, and obviously we'll have to roll out the portal for that with the Tucson Eligibility Office once it's being rolled out. But once that's in there, it will allow the users to use what's on their account. Now, as far as paying the fares, we can set up a credit card payment system, but my understanding is that it has to run through the main eligibility office system. So that's something we have not looked at putting into place yet, but we did put into place the ability for each rider to have a private account that would be their funding for, this is how many vouchers they have, instead of so really a voucherless or paperless system.
Hi, Wade, this is James. I know in the past, I think Total Ride had developed a proprietary piece of software that was going to help manage that voucherless system. And is that still in play, or has that kind of been put aside?
What we did, it seemed easier to update, to have VIA update their portal system. So they essentially copied what we did in our teams that we were going to use previously to roll that out prior to COVID. And so really it works exactly the same way as I presented to you back in probably 2019.
Okay, so when we would want to roll that out, we just need to work with folks at the special services and get them trained on how to use that portal.
Exactly, and it would be the same process where they would take the payment or receiving checks or credit cards, and then instead of putting it into the other systems, they would just put it into this. They'd each have a login, and they would put it into this system, and they would go ahead and fund the account. And then once a transport was booked and it completed successfully, it would then deduct that portion. Our agents in the call center would also know, as well as the app, what their balance is. So we'd be able to tell transporters, if they're scheduling ahead of time, hey, your balance is this amount. Are you going to want to fund it additionally? So we'll be able to end-to-end track the fare payment in that way.
Great, thank you.
Jonathan, I've got a question for either you or maybe Reno. Reno, you kind of blasted through a bunch of numbers when you first started talking about pre-COVID to current ridership, and I'm wondering if you could provide a written document that would have some ridership data on it that might compare current levels to pre-COVID levels for us.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. I'll send it to Amber right after this meeting.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
We can provide that information. We've also waiting to upload our monthly operating reports. They'll have that information as well with year to date and year to year analysis as well. And we could also present that at our next transit working group meeting as well, to give a summary on our Sun Shuttle services pre and post COVID. Does anybody else have any additional questions, comments in terms of for Reno or Wade? Well, Reno and Wade, thank you so much for coming to us and updating us. Looking forward to working with you on the passenger app and bringing that into the transit working group, so folks are aware of how that process is working on the passenger side. So Thank you.
Thank you, Amber.
Thank you.
Thank you. So moving on to 5, regional transit service updates. I just brought this up, just some general discussion of what we're seeing. And as we're coming out of COVID measures and into post-COVID, some of the items that we're seeing, I think one of the biggest issues that we're facing is the driver and the labor shortages. And I wanted just to ask folks to give us an update of jurisdictions if they have questions about transit, how their services are going. John and Michael, if you'd like to bring something up in City of Tucson, and we can discuss what we're seeing, and we can go into further analysis at another transit working group. You know, we're just starting to see some numbers. It's been kind of interesting in the last few months, the smaller increases, and you know, we are facing a driver shortage, which is impacting our dial-a-ride and sometimes even our fixed route services with just trying to cover routes. So with that, does anyone have anything to add? John, do you have anything, you and Michael, on Oro Valley?
Well, our ridership is continuing to boom, and extended free fares will add to that, because people say, well, why not take the trip? So we're dealing with that. We did have one interview today of one person that we're hoping will add to our team, but we're down realistically about 10 drivers. Most of our drivers are working about, I say 15 hours more than normal each week. And most of them, normally our drivers are part-time and work 3 days a week, and most of them now are all working 4 to 5 days a week, and that's not what they signed up for, so that they're getting tired of that. And we're also analyzing our pay, and hopefully our town staff will decide that we might need to increase our pay so that we're competitive with the other transit agencies around the community. We're a bit lower than most of them. I don't know what else you might want to add to that.
Send drivers.
Yep.
We're also reviewing our driver wages on the Sun Shuttle and fixed route and the dial-a-ride side as well, to look at you know, being competitive in the market. The labor shortage has definitely made it hard to deliver just our minimum level of service when we're concerned about more folks coming on to the services this fall or later this summer. It is difficult, particularly I know Tucson School District has increased their driver pay to 16. I just heard Catalina Foothills is even higher. And we're low as well. And I don't know if the folks at Suntran or the city have any comments about, you know, I think they're seeing, everyone's seeing it within the industry about driver shortages.
Amber, it's Rhett from City Tucson. Yeah, we are well aware, and you know, outside of higher pay, we don't have a better way to address it. You know, I think it'll work itself out, probably through higher pay. We don't have a magic bullet other than that.
I would agree. There's just not a lot of options in terms of, you know, trying to attract more workers. And it all starts with a competitive wage. So we are looking at it from our standpoint. And if folks want to get together to discuss that, or we can talk about it at the next meeting in terms of what your local recommendations have been. It is just an industry problem nationwide as well. We're seeing it. Any other updates in terms of regional transit services?
Amber, this is Mike. I think one of the things that the reason why it's so global is that we're also competing against unemployment. For us, most of our drivers are part-time, so they make more money on unemployment than actually working. So when they stop doing the federal input on the unemployment, that's going to help.
I believe there's also some incentives for part-time and full-time work that the state is providing as well. I believe it's once September 1 hits, if someone has a full-time job, they receive a certain amount of dollars of benefit, a one-time benefit. And if they have part-time, it's certain. I think it's like $1,500 for full-time. I don't know for sure. I don't have that. I had looked at it and I don't have it in front of me. Any additional input or any suggestions for upcoming meetings? We will provide a thorough analysis of pre and post-COVID Sun Shuttle services. We can do that at the next Transit Working Group. Are there any other items that folks are dealing with within the jurisdictions, items that you'd like more information on? Just please let me know.
Amber, we'll be talking about the next annual TIP 5307 process in the next meeting or two, won't we?
Yes, we will.
Okay.
Amber, this is James. I just wanted to mention two things. One, just as an FYI to the group, SunTran is in the middle of labor negotiations right now, so we can't comment on that at all, but just to let you all know that that's happening. And then two, we are also looking to conduct a comprehensive operational analysis in the coming fiscal year. So again, just as an FYI, that's something on the radar, and we'll bring more information to the group as that sort of develops.
Thanks, James. I've had some of our providers ask us about fares as well, and I have not heard anything in terms of the city. Are they going to continue fare free after the end of June?
Rhett, you may have a better
understanding
of that.
Thanks, James. Yeah, Amber, it looks like we're going to be going through the calendar year.
Okay.
I realize that's tough on our friends over in Oro Valley. Yeah, that's the date. So it's through December 31st.
This is a unilateral decision of the city. Is this something that everybody feels like we need to continue to stay in alignment with? And I ask that not to pick fights, but to just ask rhetorically, is this something that we feel that we need to continue to do?
Jim, could you state your question again? I just want to make sure I understood it.
I guess the question is, do we feel that we need to continue to follow the city's lead in going forward with not restoring fares? If the city is making the decision on its own not to go forward with reintroducing fares, that's their choice, their prerogative. Understood. Is that something that the rest of the region feels is appropriate for the rest of the system? That's a question. I don't know what the obstacles would be to going out and going forward with starting to collect fares. But looking at, say, as we're starting to ramp back up and trying to meet what may be a need for new services associated with the university when they come back to school, things like that. Those are going to be putting, financial burdens on everybody. And if the city is opting to not go forward with collecting fares. Is that something everybody else in the region feels is appropriate for their individual jurisdictions?
This is John at Town of Oro Valley. I just understood that the federal law says we can't charge more than double the fixed route, and the fixed route's charging 0. So it would seem we cannot charge more than 0.
Here, I haven't thought about your question before, but it seems to me that, to provide any feedback, unless the jurisdiction already has a prepared position that they could share today, we kind of have to kind of break it down. And to me, I think there's a couple issues that jump out front for consideration. One is, what are the financial implications of not having fares? And I think that's probably the subtext of your question, unstated. But I think, it's a numbers issue, and to what extent does that impact those that are paying for the service? And I don't have an answer for that, frankly, right now, and I'm not sure you do either. But the second question, I think, kind of is more of a theoretical concern, and that is, to what extent are the fare reductions going to help encourage transit ridership? There's always that balance between getting enough ridership and getting enough fares to pay for the service, and maybe charging too much to dissuade them. So I think seems like we're building service back in the community, but we're not up to pre-COVID levels yet. And I'm wondering, what's that inflection point? What's that date at which you start charging full fares again that dissuades folks from jumping back on, versus right now where they know they can get on there for free? And I don't have that magic date, but I think that's the other kind of theoretical aspect of your question that we would want to chew on before we kind of present a position. So
yeah, Jonathan, that was very unfair of me. You're right to have asked what people's positions are, because frankly, we just now heard that we're not getting fares, reestablished most likely at the end of the month. So I think the broader question is, have you talked with your own management and begun the dialogue going up to policymakers as to whether or not they want to continue with this policy? I see value both ways. You said it very appropriately, Jonathan, about this being something that has a lot of potential impact, both pro and con, to our organizations. And is this being discussed, or are we just accepting this as a fait accompli as a result of actions by the Tucson Council that influence the rest of us? And that's, I think, the broader question that we need to be giving some thought to. I'm not, again, I prefaced it by saying I'm not trying to pick fights. That's probably an inelegant way for me to have put that, but we know that we're all affected by the decisions that are being made by Tucson, and that's something that we need to be mindful of, and it will have impacts on the rest of the region.
Is this something that the Transit Working Group would like to discuss at its upcoming meeting? Just some of the financial implications we're seeing within the services? Do we want to just, what would the group like to see? Is there any interest to review it?
Well, one thing that I know we'll need to do is, we're in the midst of having a conversation with the city of Tucson about the upcoming fiscal year's intergovernmental agreements. And, if in the past the revenue from fares has represented 20% of the cost of delivery of service, what does that mean to us in terms of our bottom lines as partners with the city of Tucson through IGAs. So I think that's something that we'll need to hear from the city on as
Yeah.
they present to us the proposed fares for, or the, not fares, but the proposed costs to the regional partners for these pass-through services, or these services delivered extraterritorially to the city of Tucson. And in the case of the RTA, we fund services that are expanded services within the corporate limits of the city as well. So.
One other thing I wanted to, this is James again, one other thing I wanted to make the group aware of is the city did receive a research grant, COVID-19 research grant, and part of that grant is going to be a fare study. Now it's got a little bit of a spin on it because it's kind of more from a public health, public equity angle, but we will, that as part of that study, there will be an analysis of the fare system. So it won't necessarily be looking at different, fare mechanisms or the way a traditional, fare increase proposal was. So if you all remember the way that the last fare increase proposal the city did, they went through a process and the outcome was known. There was going to be a fare raise of some kind. They just didn't know how they were going to implement it. This isn't that. This is more of a holistic fare study. So we would, almost kind of an alternatives analysis, I think. So that will be happening. Now, I can't speak to whether the council will make a more lasting decision before that study is completed or not. I don't know, what their decision-making process will be, but I just wanted to say that is something it's in the works.
James, when do you plan to kick that off? When does that study, when will it be initiated?
James, I can answer this one.
Thanks, Davida.
Hey, so it actually just kicked off this month, actually the end of May. It will be completed between October and November of this year. So it's happening right now, and it's not a very long process. So by fall, we will have the results.
Just out of curiosity, is when we're looking at these potential fare options, is it reasonable to consider a no fare?
That is one of the that is one of the items that they're looking at. So in this particular application, because it came through the lens of COVID-19, improving the community impression of transit and contactless and touchless, more of a public health distancing. It came directly out of COVID-19, but I think the reason FTA is asking for us to think about things like this is for future pandemic issues or other health crises. So this analysis will look at not only our fare structure, but the technologies that we use. And one of the items on their list is what if we have no fare? So it is part of the overall evaluation.
Great, that's I'm pleased to hear that. I mean, I think it's a legitimate question to ask. What are the costs of collecting fares? And they're not insubstantial. And are they exceeded by the fares we collect?
Yeah.
So, is a fare a barrier to use?
Right. And it's interesting because we requested $2 million. We got $600,000. The one area of the grant that we requested weren't able to fund, and it's turned out to sort of be a blessing for us, was installing QR code readers wherever we needed them. And that was the most expensive part of our request. And by not getting that portion of the grant, we have an opportunity to step back and look at fares in general more holistically. But like James mentioned, one of the recommendations coming out of this fare is not what our fare should be. It's about our structure and our technology and whether or not we should have fairs.
I'm looking forward to that study. You know, it's just industry discussion all the time is, and Jonathan brought it up, does the fair dissuade while we're trying to promote and increase ridership? Does the fair dissuade it? Is there a balance when there's certain levels of ridership? And then you throw in a pandemic with it, and it's a difficult subject to kind of get your arms around, particularly when we're looking at increased wage costs and service costs and trying to offset with revenues. So we look forward to the outcome of the study. Davida, will you bring it back to the group so we can see the outcome? Or whoever's overseeing it.
So I think either James or myself, Chris
Perfect.
Blue is the city project manager, and then I'm a Suntran project manager on this. So between the two of us, we could probably have no trouble bringing it back at the end.
Amber, yeah, this is right. We will bring it back after we've gone through it and with a fine tooth comb. Absolutely.
So, Amber, this is James again. I will say that in the spirit of the regional partnership on transit, I do think it would be helpful, though, to hear the individual operators, jurisdictions who are going to be impacted by this, you know, to get their opinion on the fares. Now, that may or may not have any effect on what City Council decides, but I think it would be a valuable piece of data, you know, a decision-making tool for those people who do have to make that decision. Because, you know, like John mentioned, just the mechanism of double the ADA fares, you know, it's kind of getting into the weeds a little bit, but you asked that question, which, like, you know, if Oro Valley picks up a ride, let's say Sun Shuttle re-implements fares, they pick up a ride in that Sun Shuttle 3/4 mile area, and then leave that area and come into the city of Tucson, how do you classify that trip? You know, if the majority of the miles of that trip are in an area where there are no fares, how do you justify charging for that? So it's, you know, because of the fact that we've always had this sort of borderless system, and we've tried to have a borderless regional seamless system, it makes it complicated to have, you know, to have a differing fare structure. So you know, yes, it would be helpful to hear those comments.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in terms of, I look at it from just the rider standpoint that doesn't really see these jurisdictional boundaries. They just need to get from point A to point B and from different locations within the city to outside in the county, vice versa. Looking at it from the jurisdictional standpoint, but also just from some of the initial on the user side, what those barriers would be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was why we always strove for that seamless system, was to make the user experience, you know, a better one. So I agree with you there 100%.
Mm-hmm. We can reach out to the jurisdictions and get some input and bring them back to the next group if we'd like to further the discussion and at least just get some better ideas and what the jurisdictions foresee within the services they're providing. We could do that. Any additional items that folks have in terms of our regional transit updates or announcements? Well, with that, I would like to adjourn the meeting and schedule the next meeting in the next month or two, either June 8th, or let's see, it would be July 13th or August. Would be the second Tuesday in August. Does one work better for folks? I would like the group to to meet more regularly so we can get updates with our services and the issues that we're seeing within our jurisdictions.
Amber, it's Rhett, City of Tucson.
Yes.
August actually works better for us.
Okay.
We've got a lot on our plates between the triennial and some other issues, labor negotiations, some other internal things we're working on. So we would prefer August.
Amber,
Anybody?
and
Yes.
Marina, and August is better for me also.
Okay. Well, with that said, then we will look at August. It would be the 10th. The Tuesday at 10th at 11 o'clock would be our next transit working group meeting. I thank you all for participating today. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.